Situations like, "You should have listened to me." What's a time in your life when someone didn't listen to you, but you ended up being right? My brother inherited a house and decided to sell it to his friend. I told him it was crucial for the friend to handle everything through the bank, get a loan, a mortgage, and do everything as if it were a transaction with a stranger. But no. Since it was a friend, my brother just signed a property waiver and agreed they'd shake on it, with the friend paying monthly over 30 years. Guess who died a couple of years later? And whose wife suddenly forgot their verbal agreement? Now the friend's wife has a great house she got for free. Once, my younger brother and I were biking to the store. He said he wanted to try riding with his arms crossed on the handlebars. I strongly advised against it. He tried anyway. We ended up adding bandages to our shopping list. A manager at an auto shop wrote repair estimates for cars. He'd order parts and let customers leave, telling them to come back when the parts arrived. Personally, I hated pre-ordering parts, too risky. This went on for months, and pre-ordered parts piled up in storage. I kept raising this with our director and the shop manager. I told them many parts had been sitting so long that their return window had expired. They didn't care. Stop stressing about it. A few months later, the manager quit. The new manager started calling clients to come in for repairs. Turns out, many had already fixed their cars elsewhere. Some had been in accidents that totaled their cars. Others had sold or traded their vehicles. The shop had to write off tens of thousands in losses, all because they should have listened to me from the start. My boss didn't believe one of my employees was clocking hours he didn't work. This was right after peak COVID, when everyone went remote. She accused me of micromanaging and said I should just trust him. But I did trust him while also tracking how often he logged into the system. When she finally realized he worked at most 4 hours a week and took over a month to make a one-line code change, it clicked. Then they admitted I was right and took action. I worked at a major printer company as a project manager, launching a direct shipping process for U.S. customers from our Mexico plant under NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. 3 months after my project started, a sister division decided to do the same. I joined their meetings so we could collaborate on cross-border legal nuances. After 6 weeks of meetings, they only discussed projected profits and were full of enthusiasm. They were annoyed by my clarifying questions, so I told my director, 2 levels above me, I'd stop wasting time on them and focus on my project. 5 months later, the sister division started shipping 30 trucks a day while I hadn't even shipped my first truck. The director called me in and tore into me for being slow and inefficient. I said I didn't understand how they'd gotten all U.S. customs approvals so fast, while my project was genuinely 3 weeks behind. The boss was furious. About 6 weeks later, I shipped my first truck. It got stuck at customs. Releasing it took 3 days, 100 calls, and a mountain of paperwork. But it reached the customers. After that, we shipped 3 trucks a day with almost no delays. And within a week, everything ran smoothly. Turns out, the sister division stopped shipments after 150 trucks got stuck at the border, leaving millions in goods undelivered. It took them 7 months to clear the first truck. The whole ordeal cost them $5 million, and many customers were furious. My project saved the company $500K by year end, and eventually $3 million annually. Weeks after this success, I went back to the director and said my project took so long because we knew what we were doing and did it right. He quietly agreed. I was bored and tossing a very dull knife at my leg. By dull, I mean it barely cut a banana. A friend saw me and said it was dangerous. I shrugged. It's so dull it wouldn't even pierce my apron. To prove it, I threw the knife a bit harder and it stuck in my leg. Turns out, even a very dull knife can still be sharp. I worked for a company that ran 3 5-day adventure trips for private school students. We hired a guy with extensive hiking experience. From day one, I felt he did whatever he wanted on his own schedule, and everyone else should feel honored to work with him. I noticed him cutting corners and doing unsafe things, especially since we led clients, not just hiked for fun. This was our job. I repeatedly told our boss, who brushed it off since nothing bad happened. After a year, I filed a formal complaint, citing safety issues and noting I'd raised concerns before with no result. I wanted it documented. Ironically, about 24 hours after my email, the guy messed up big time. He took students to an area I'd repeatedly warned against due to poor emergency access and had them swim in a rushing river. Turns out he'd done this before but got away with it. This time, the current was stronger than usual. Half the group got swept away and separated. Luckily, no one was seriously hurt, but one girl was injured and had to be evacuated, which was extremely hard due to their location and the split group. Later, I learned both halves thought the other had died. It took him hours to contact the other half. Poor kids. I love adventure too, that's why I love this job. But there were so many red flags he and my boss ignored. I had a coworker, let's call her Tina. She proudly said she'd been stabbed, slanged for drugs, free for 6 months. But her boyfriend, who lived in their car, still used. She lived alone in an apartment, and he'd broken in multiple times to steal things for drug money. Another coworker and her boyfriend befriended Tina. They grew close and offered to let her live with them. I said it was a terrible idea. Tina was newly sober, and her boyfriend could break into their place too. Their lease was ending in a month, but their new place was ready a few towns over. They told Tina she could stay alone in their old apartment until the lease ended, then she'd have to leave. A month later, they returned. Tina had relapsed with the same guy, started using, and stripped their apartment clean. I heard this from another coworker. I asked why he was telling me. Not them. He said, "They're too ashamed to admit you were right." I'm a teacher. Once, district administrators visited my class to observe how well students worked in groups. One boy sat alone. They complained he wasn't in a group. I said, "He can't." They replied, "What do you mean he can't? Of course he can." I just looked at them and kept working. Less than 2 minutes later, we were solving problems. I checked his work, he'd made a calculation error. I said, "Check your multiplication. The mistake is in the second line." The boy looked at me, yelled, "I did it right," and threw his chair. I glanced at our guest and shrugged. Yep, this child was in behavioral correction classes and was advised to sit separately due to aggression outbursts. I was operations manager at a small family company, working 80+ hours a week with barely any days off. A new employee couldn't handle his simple job and constantly distracted me. I told him to ask our manager because she knew what to do. That same day, I was called into the office and asked, "Do you think you're overpaid?" I asked why and heard, "I don't think you're worth what we pay you if you can't handle your duties." I clarified, "You mean because I directed him to you about his contract?" Yes. It's lazy and unprofessional to send someone to the boss when they're busy. I stepped outside for air and immediately got a call about an interview for a job I'd applied to a year earlier. The pay was higher. I said I could interview that day. They agreed. I drove there, interviewed, and got the job. Back at the office, I quit. I said, "If you think I'm not worth it, fine, but you'll need at least 4 people to replace me." 2 months later, they hired 5 to handle my workload. A friend. Weirdly, my husband is so stingy, bans any big purchases. We have separate accounts, no hobbies or addictions. Where does his money go? Me. He has a second family. Cue arguments. "You don't know anything. You're crazy." Me. Okay. 5 months later, surprise. His mistress couldn't pay her bills, so he suddenly said, "Honey, great idea, let's merge finances." Background. Australia has industry-wide pay agreements setting minimum wages. Companies can make their own deals, but must beat the industry standard. I'd worked at one company for over 3 years. They optimized things, replacing our manager with a new one without explanation. This angered many, including me. I asked the new manager which agreement covered me. A week later, he gave me a paper saying I was a wool warehouse storeman. Strange, since we did event lighting equipment and I regularly worked on site. I dug deeper and found government pay agreements showing our company fell under entertainment industry. They'd lied and underpaid me for 2.5 years. I filed a complaint with evidence. Timesheets, payslips for 3 years. I had them because I worked solo Saturdays with office access. Authorities opted for mediation instead of charges. The manager attended one meeting, told the owners, then ghosted. I sued for wage theft. Once word spread I'd sued, coworkers from other branches treated me like scum. Then I was fired, so I sued again for retaliation. They settled that suit, but the first case continued. I won. The judge tore them apart and ordered full back pay plus interest. Everyone at work thought I was worth scum. 2 years later, the company went bankrupt. Turns out they hadn't paid pensions for 10 years. Those who called me scum, they lost tens of thousands in retirement savings. Years later, on a professional forum, someone mentioned the company. A former employee wrote, "That company's gone. Guess I'll never see my pension." I replied, "I could say something now, but I won't." During my undergrad, in the early 2010s, I did physics research. We took a field trip to LIGO, the Large Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, a massive experiment to detect gravitational waves, which hadn't been observed yet. Afterward, a smug classmate wouldn't shut up about how pointless it was and how they'd fail. This guy constantly lectured everyone, acted superior, and I argued with him regularly, including about this. I said scientists smarter than him believed it was possible, so there was a chance. He called me an idiot for believing it could even be detected. When gravitational waves were detected in 2015 and won a Nobel Prize, I felt amazing. I only thought, I told you so, in my head because I hated him and wouldn't message him. So, FCKU, Jeff, you were wrong. I was right. I refused to eat mushrooms my in-laws foraged. These people never read a book, let alone a mushroom guide. Guess who ended up in the hospital? The mushrooms weren't poisonous, but weren't edible either. The best part? Other relatives were told not to tell us what happened. They told us anyway. I once worked at a dog daycare. I had professional training and private coaching experience, but moved cities and wanted stability. Everyone knew I was experienced. New dogs got a free half-day trial to see if the daycare suited them. One dog, Tilda 30 kilograms, was put in a kennel to settle. Later, I entered with a water bowl and bent to set it down. He politely but firmly made it clear I should leave. I apologized, slowly exited, and told the supervisor to call the owner. This dog didn't belong here. He said I was overreacting. I said the dog clearly felt uncomfortable and would bite if pushed. He ignored me. Remember, he knew my years of experience. The supervisor then entered the kennel. For context, he was Tilda 190 centimeters tall. I'm Tilda 160 centimeters. He reached toward the dog, who bit him badly enough to draw blood. He walked out silently, told reception to call the owner, and went to the hospital. The owner picked up the dog, who was finally happy. The supervisor? Not so much. Me? Smug smile. I joined an engineering firm, entering a market they knew nothing about. They hired a very inexperienced engineer to design a system. He used metal too thin for a structure meant to hold 1,800 kilograms. I said immediately, under cyclic loading, this will fail in 1-2 years. It's dangerous. About 1.5 years later, it collapsed. No one was hurt, but watching management and engineers scramble to justify themselves was wild. Most people have no concept of integrity. My grandparents' roof looked terrible. Pieces literally fell off when my grandpa's helper swept it. I kept telling Grandpa it needed major repairs. He'd say, "You don't understand. It's veneno leaks." I finally said, "It might not leak now, but it will soon. Then you'll pay for a new roof and leak damage." Grandma agreed and insisted he get it inspected. Guess what? The roof was terrible and already leaking. A simple repair turned into leak fixes and a full replacement. I stood nearby as the roofer showed Grandpa his brittle shingles and damage over the porch. Grandpa sighed, looked at me, and said, "Go ahead, get it over with." I said, "I told you. Hope you take me seriously now." Grandma cut in, "Don't worry, dear, I'll make sure he does. My ex-husband, then husband, never had chickenpox as a child. Over 13 years together, I often told him to get vaccinated. Adults get it severely. He always brushed it off. After our first child was born, he said, 'I will,' but never did. 10 years later, he caught chickenpox and got violently ill, nearly hospitalized. His new partner was pregnant and advised to leave home during his illness. He couldn't work for weeks. I admit I enjoyed that 'I told you so' moment. The worst, 'I told you so.' Mom died. Dad lived alone 150 kilometers away, in the boonies, 30 kilometers from the nearest town. People wouldn't visit, and he wouldn't leave. He signed up on a dating site and ended up on ChinaLove.com. He found a 60-year-old beauty who looked 18 in photos. He paid per chat, messaged with her, proudly told us about her, then announced he'd fly to China for 6 weeks to meet her. Our whole family said it was a scam. He didn't believe us and went. He returned 6 weeks later with an approximately 65-year-old Chinese woman and married her immediately. Over the next few years, she brought her whole family here and started draining his money. Now he spends his pension buying baby formula to ship to China, where her family resells it. He fully supports her relatives living here. He's too ashamed to admit he messed up and will let her bleed him dry. I worked evening shifts at a busy gas station store. My boss always scheduled only 2 people for closing and wondered why we couldn't finish tasks despite customer traffic. I repeatedly said we needed more evening staff. He understood we were busy, but claimed we should work more efficiently. Most stores in our chain closed with 2 people. He was used to that. Once, in his office, I raised it again. He said, "I'll show you corporate's exact staffing recommendations. You'll see we're standard. He opened the document stating how many employees were needed per hour based on traffic. We both fell silent, seeing our store required 5 people until closing, not 2. I just stared at him. He hesitated. Well, it does say. After that, he tried scheduling more people, though staff was scarce. Still, it felt good to be proven right. I learned the woman who saved the first Star Wars from being trash shares my view that the prequels, sequels are bad. Her name is Marcia Lucas, George Lucas's ex-wife. She won an Oscar for editing A New Hope. Even if I won $1 billion, I couldn't buy a more authoritative ally. A teen friend worked at Wendy's and hated his manager for not letting him slack. Once, mid-shift, he decided to leave early for a party. I was already at the party. He called asking what to do. He wanted to quit anyway. I said, if you want to leave, at least finish your shift and explain it to your manager so you don't screw her over. He showed up at the party 15 minutes later in his uniform. I just shook my head. 5-6 years later, he graduated college and applied for a real adult job. Guess who was the HR person? Shortest interview of his life. My ex-husband had anger issues and hit me several times. When I left him, he told everyone I'd lied. He'd never touched me. I had photo proof. After our divorce, custody settlement, I looked him in the eye and said, if you ever hit a woman again, everyone will know you're a liar. Learn to control yourself. I still remember his expression furious. But he never hit anyone again. He's now married to my best friend's sister. I'm genuinely glad. I had a family emergency and had to go to my hometown for a weekend. That weekend, my manager scheduled me for a morning shift last minute, but didn't notify me. I missed it, me only no-show. After that, he treated me horribly. Once, I shopped at the store using my employee discount. That manager was on duty. He made an excuse to deny my discount. I sighed. Whatever. But then he snapped. Why'd you miss your shift last Monday? I was baffled since my one no-show. I'd checked my schedule daily and knew I wasn't scheduled Monday. I said so, but he insisted. You missed another shift. Pay attention. I repeated I wasn't on the schedule. He went to the back to get the paper schedule and show whose name was on that shift. It wasn't mine. It was the only other black girl working there. We looked nothing alike and had completely different names. We just shared a skin color. The manager apologized, gave me a double discount, and was slightly politer afterward. But yeah, that was an I told you so moment. Thanks for watching. Share your similar stories in the comments below and check out our other videos. Bye everyone.